John stood and dropped his pants. The priest leaned in to examine the growth. Within 5 seconds, the protuberance absorbed him. 2 weeks later, John was still having trouble making it around with the priest lodged in his thigh, but the protuberance had finally stopped talking. This next piece is called Monster.
Lift the mic.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Monster. In the middle of flattening the city, the monster developed a conscience. It began searching for sizable stationery to write a formal apology to the mayor. This next one's called Dirty Larry. Detective Larry Conahan blew up the DA's office just in case he was crooked. For Halloween, I give you a ghost story. No one ever scared or even flinched because no one could see Jonathan Starks, whose spirit haunted Starks Manor. But he didn't give up hope even when the recent owners moved in. He jumped out from behind the grandfather clock one night when the lady of the house woke to use the bathroom. He made a spooky expression another time when one of the kids walked into their room and he was laying on the bed, yet no one was affected. Jonathan Starks eventually accepted the fact that he was a genuine ghost, invisible to the living eye. He tried re-killing himself when the family came home one evening, but the Rolls Royce drove right through him. He screamed, but no one heard him. My last piece is a little bit longer. It's a story called Love Thy Neighbor. I know he'll come after I complete my task tonight. He's visited me after every offering, sometimes even lying beside me until my pulse returned to normal. I find him a constant source of comfort despite his requirements. At first I tried to argue, but by the third time I began to feel what he meant. I understood his need for connection, for fellowship. Hey, I had just buttoned my shirt when my neighbor startled me. It was the first time he'd come to visit me right before a mission. Everything good, he asked, looking at me with those brown eyes that could melt the panties off a porn star. Everything's good. I showed him the gift he'd given me just about a year ago and then slid it back into my waistband. Are you okay? You seem a bit nervous. He snickered. I'm not nervous at all, David. I'm more excited than usual, though. Why? What's different this time? Oh, something's much different, he said, now sitting on the edge of my bed. For starters, she'll be in Brooklyn this time. You know your way around Brooklyn, don't you? As my neighbor spoke, a twinkle I'd never seen before appeared in his eyes. But then again, this was the first time I saw him so close to the time. Of course, I told you I know my way around already. Good, because I saw her again last week. Beautiful, much prettier than the others. She reminds me of a movie star from the 20s. He repositioned his legs and then continued. I can tell her blood will be sweeter too. He left my apartment as mysteriously as he had entered. By the time I finished adjusting my shirt in the mirror, he had left without a goodbye or even an I'll see you later. For whatever reason, this would be my most important one yet. And maybe, just maybe, this time my neighbor will reveal a bit more, especially if all goes as smoothly as the others. I took the Bell Parkway to my destination. When I came off the merge from Industry City and rounded the large turn that led to Bay Ridge, the span of the Verrazano Bridge greeted me, which always reminded me of a frown. It played with my head as if upset over what I was about to do and what I had done in the past. But by the time I passed it and continued to the next exit, it really didn't matter what it thought of me. All that mattered was making my neighbor happy. All that mattered was the joy he'd get when I told him I did what he'd asked me to do. Then we'd both experience that bond no friends, lovers, or even family members ever did. We'd have true communion with one another. We'd have true love that existed on a plane few would ever come to know. Like my neighbor had told me, she was sitting in the passenger seat in some guy's car directly under a streetlight near a mid-sized park. I spotted them just under 2 blocks away thanks to her golden locks. I parked and sat for about 10 minutes before leaving my vehicle. It was 2:20 a.m. when I decided it was safe. I began my approach, sticking to the shadows, keeping my ears open for any sign of people or cars coming from a distance. My neighbor's gift was tight against my groin, but the time had come to advance it to my back pocket. It was heavy, but by now had become an extension of my hand and of my neighbor's love. I was less than a half block away when I decided to make the rest of my trek through the poorly lit park. It was hard to make out the blonde's features, but I could tell she and her male companion were young, easily in their early 20s or maybe late teens. It made me wonder what kind of parents let their young daughter hang out so late with the boy, or if the parents even knew she was out. Chances are she told her folks she was sleeping at a friend's house or some other such nonsense. The couple kissed, unaware of my presence as I quietly stepped out of the park. I was 10 feet behind the car, my eyes focused on the girl. Even from the back of her head, I could tell why my neighbor had become so infatuated. Marilyn Monroe came to mind, as did any host of old-time movie starlets. And the way she kissed the young man wasn't slutty or how I had seen the girls do it back when I was in high school. She seemed to really care for this guy, and he for her. Focus, I heard my neighbor say. I need her blood, David, I need it. His voice helped me each time. It eased the guilt and the fear. It reminded me of the love that was to be had, of the fellowship waiting for me when I got home. So I focused. Unlike the other times, the girl turned as I raised my neighbor's gift a few feet from her window. And in the split second before her face vanished, I caught a glimpse of what had made my neighbor spellbound. She had the eyes of an angel, and I don't say that lightly. I could see into heaven itself, even if for such a brief fraction of time. Had I looked into them a moment sooner, I surely would have considered forfeiting the indescribable love my neighbor and I were to share in a few hours. And when her blood splashed across the headrest and windshield, it sounded like 1,000 angels singing. I was so taken aback I almost forgot to deliver a gift to the girl's boyfriend. His blood offered no such chorus, and I hated knowing it mingled with the perfection I had witnessed for so brief a time. Focus. I again heard my neighbor's voice. I ran back into the park and headed to my Ford Galaxy. There was so much I needed to talk with my neighbor about. I kept struggling with the idea he had somehow discovered an angel living on Earth, and that those who came before her were either practiced for this moment or cases of mistaken identity. The blood from the others was special, but none gave me the otherworldly delight as this one. Later that early morning, we nestled on my bed. We stared up at the shadows caused by the moon as it was slowly replaced by dawn's light. My body felt as if it were floating, our conversation perfect and without the slightest hint of selfishness or hate, jealousy or contention. We knew a pure love similar to the last times, only this time it was perfect. In the midst of our experience, we both chuckled, thinking about some of the things written about me in the newspapers, especially the moronic tales of cults and devil worship. No Satanist would ever know the love my neighbor and I shared, all without physical contact or mental mind games. Our laughs eventually subsided, and we continued to enjoy each other's company. When my neighbor had to leave, I fell asleep, shortly after contemplating what could possibly come next. Would he find another angel living in New York, or would I have to travel to keep our paradise alive? I'd do whatever was necessary to continue to love my neighbor and to keep this level of pureness between us. 2 weeks after my first experience of perfect love, I went outside to get instructions from my neighbor. I was only a few feet from my front door when a bunch of police officers commanded me to get to the ground. They cuffed me and started making derogatory comments about the rifle I was stupid enough to leave on the back seat of my car. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Words came from my mouth, although I can't recall what they were. I was too busy trying to get my neighbor to talk, to tell me who was next before these guys shoved me into the back seat of one of their cars. But he just stood there, looking through his fence in sad, disbelieving silence, the tail hanging between his legs. My heart broke, and I knew Harvey's did too. The shadows on the ceiling of my cell remind me of the last time my neighbor and I spent together in perfect love. He never came to see me, but knowing Harvey, it was part of his plan. He's smart, a lot smarter than me. And I know when I finally get out of here, he'll visit me in my room and tell me where to go next. He'll keep the love alive.
Woo.